My boss, Amanda Reeves, told me I was too emotional for the senior marketing director position, said I needed to learn to control myself if I ever wanted to advance. 3 weeks later, at the quarterly board meeting, I played a recording that exposed what she really thought about promoting women. When the board heard her actual words, security escorted her out of the building within an hour. And I was cleaning out her corner office by the end of the week. This is the story of how I went from being dismissed as too emotional to becoming the youngest department head in my company's history. And why you should always keep receipts. My name is Rachel Martinez, and for 4 years, I had lived and breathed Pinnacle Creative Solutions. At 32, I was the kind of employee every company claims they want but few actually appreciate. I had an MBA from Duke University, a track record that spoke for itself, and the kind of work ethic that made my colleagues both admire and pity me. Pinnacle Creative Solutions was one of those mid-sized advertising agencies in Charlotte, North Carolina, that prided itself on being forward-thinking and employee-centric. Their website featured smiling diverse faces and buzzwords like innovation, collaboration, and equal opportunity. The kind of place that had a ping-pong table in the break room and casual Fridays. But somehow still felt like it was stuck in 1995 when it came to actually promoting women. I'd started there right out of graduate school as a junior account coordinator. It wasn't glamorous, mostly organizing meetings, updating spreadsheets, and fielding angry calls from clients whose campaigns weren't performing as expected. But I saw it as my foot in the door, my chance to prove that I belonged in the world of high-stakes advertising, and prove myself I did. Within 6 months, I was managing my own accounts. Small ones at first: a local restaurant chain, a boutique fitness studio, a family-owned furniture store. But I treated each client like they were Fortune 500 companies. I studied their businesses inside and out, analyzed their customer demographics, and created campaigns that didn't just meet their expectations but exceeded them. The fitness studio saw a 40% increase in membership in the first quarter of my campaign. The furniture store had their best sales month in 5 years after I redesigned their entire digital strategy. The restaurant chain was so impressed that they referred 3 other businesses to Pinnacle, specifically asking for me to handle their accounts. By the end of my first year, I'd been promoted to account manager. By the end of my second year, I was a senior account manager with a team of 3 junior coordinators reporting to me. My performance reviews were consistently rated exceptional. My client retention rate was 98%, the highest in the company. I was invited to present at industry conferences. Other agencies tried to poach me with higher salaries and better titles, but I stayed at Pinnacle because I believed in what we were building. Or at least, what I thought we were building. Amanda Reeves had been my boss for the last 2.5 years. She was the VP of Marketing, a woman in her late 40s who had worked her way up through the ranks over 15 years. When I first met her, I was genuinely excited. Finally, I thought, a female leader who would understand the challenges women face in this industry. Someone who could mentor me, guide my career, help me navigate the subtle and not so subtle biases that still plague the advertising world. I was so naive. Amanda was polished in that particular way that corporate women of a certain generation had perfected. Perfect blowouts, designer suits that probably cost more than my monthly rent, and a smile that never quite reached her eyes. She spoke fluent corporate speak, turning simple concepts into elaborate presentations filled with synergy and paradigm shifts and best practices. At first, our relationship seemed promising. She praised my work in team meetings, included me in high-level strategy sessions, and even mentioned me by name in company-wide emails when my campaigns performed well. I thought she was grooming me for bigger things. The cracks started showing gradually. It began with small comments during our one-on-one meetings. "You might want to tone down your enthusiasm in client presentations," she'd say. "Some people might find it intense." Or, "I noticed you spoke up quite a bit in the strategy meeting yesterday. Maybe let others contribute more next time." I tried to take her feedback seriously. I modulated my voice in meetings, held back my ideas until others had spoken, smiled more, and argued less. I told myself she was helping me develop executive presence, teaching me the unwritten rules of corporate success, but the feedback kept coming. You seemed a little flustered when the Johnson Industries client pushed back on the timeline. She'd note after meetings where I thought I'd handled difficult conversations professionally. You need to work on staying calm under pressure. I think you might have come across as defensive when the creative team questioned your strategy. She'd say after I'd simply explained my reasoning for certain campaign decisions. Your presentation style is very passionate, that's great, but you might want to consider a more measured approach. Clients respond better to calm confidence. I started second-guessing everything. Was I too emotional? Was I coming across as unstable? Was my passion for my work actually a liability? The thing is, none of my clients ever complained about my style. In fact, they consistently praised my energy, my dedication, and my ability to really understand their businesses. My campaigns continued to outperform expectations. My team loved working with me. I had the lowest turnover rate of any senior manager in the company. But Amanda's comments were relentless, and they always centered around the same theme. I was too much, too emotional, too intense, too passionate, too outspoken. I started noticing that she never gave similar feedback to my male colleagues. 1. Jeremy Thompson got heated during a budget discussion. Amanda called it passionate advocacy for his clients. When David Kim pushed back aggressively on a creative concept, she praised his strong leadership and commitment to excellence. But when I did the exact same things, advocated for my clients, challenged ideas I thought were weak, showed enthusiasm for great work, I was being emotional and needed to learn better self-control. The double standard was so obvious. It was almost comical. Almost. Despite the constant criticism, I kept excelling. I brought in Hartwell Manufacturing, a mid-sized industrial company that became our third-largest client within 6 months. I developed a new social media strategy framework that the entire company adopted. I was selected to represent Pinnacle at the Southeast Advertising Summit, where my presentation on integrated digital campaigns was so well received that 2 other agencies offered me jobs on the spot. My team respected me. My clients trusted me. Industry peers sought my advice. By every objective measure, I was succeeding, except in Amanda's eyes. The senior marketing director position opened up in March. Daniel Wright, who had held the role for 3 years, was promoted to VP at another agency. It was a natural progression for me. I had more experience than any other senior manager, better results, stronger client relationships. I'd been essentially doing the job already, covering for Daniel during his frequent business trips and medical leave. When I heard about the opening, I felt a surge of excitement I hadn't experienced in months. This was it. This was the opportunity I'd been working toward for 4 years. The chance to finally step into a leadership role where I could shape strategy instead of just executing it, where I could mentor other women coming up through the ranks, where I could prove that all of Amanda's criticism had been wrong. I spent a week preparing for what I assumed would be a formal interview process. I created a presentation outlining my vision for the department, compiled data showing my impact on company revenue, and gathered testimonials from satisfied clients. I even bought a new suit, navy blue, conservative cut, the kind of outfit that screamed executive material. But there was no interview process. Instead, Amanda called me into her office on a Tuesday afternoon in late March. Her corner office was intimidatingly pristine, white furniture, abstract art, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Charlotte skyline. Everything designed to remind visitors that she was important, successful, powerful. "Rachel," she said, gesturing for me to sit in one of the uncomfortable modernist chairs across from her glass desk. "I wanted to talk to you about the senior director position." My heart rate picked up. This was it. The conversation I'd been preparing for. "I've been thinking about your career trajectory," she continued, her tone measured and professional. "And I've decided that you're not quite ready for this level of responsibility." The words hit me like a physical blow. "I'm sorry, what?" "Don't get me wrong," Amanda said, her expression sympathetic in that practiced corporate way. "You're a talented account manager. Your clients love you, your campaigns perform well. But leadership requires different skills. I felt my mouth go dry. What skills am I missing? My results speak for themselves. I've consistently exceeded targets. I manage the largest client portfolio in the department. My team, Rachel, she interrupted, holding up a perfectly manicured hand. This is exactly what I'm talking about. What's exactly what you're talking about? What's exactly what you're talking about? You're getting emotional right now. I can see it in your face, hear it in your voice. You're taking this personally instead of viewing it as professional feedback. I took a deep breath, trying to process what was happening. I'm not emotional. I'm asking for clarification about your decision. Your voice is raised. You're leaning forward aggressively. You interrupted me twice. Amanda's tone remained infuriatingly calm. These are the behaviors I'm concerned about. I looked down at myself. I was sitting normally in the chair. My voice had been completely level. I hadn't interrupted her. I'd simply asked follow-up questions when she paused. Amanda, I think there might be a misunderstanding. See, you're doing it again. She leaned back in her chair, creating distance between us. You're getting defensive instead of what's exactly what you're talking about. You're getting emotional right now. I can see it in your face, hear it in your voice. You're taking this personally instead of viewing it as professional feedback. I took a deep breath, trying to process what was happening. I'm not emotional. I'm asking for clarification about your decision. Your voice is raised. You're leaning forward aggressively. You interrupted me twice. Amanda's tone remained infuriatingly calm. These are the behaviors I'm concerned about. I looked down at myself. I was sitting normally in the chair. My voice had been completely level. I hadn't interrupted her. I'd simply asked follow-up questions when she paused. Amanda, I think there might be a misunderstanding. See, you're doing it again. She leaned back in her chair, creating distance between us. You're getting defensive instead of listening to what I'm telling you. The gaslighting was so blatant, so absurd, that for a moment I wondered if I was losing my mind. Was I actually behaving the way she was describing? Was I so blind to my own behavior that I couldn't see what she was seeing? What exactly would I need to do to be considered ready for promotion? I asked, working hard to keep my voice neutral. You need to learn to control your emotions. In leadership positions, people look to you to set the tone. If you're reactive, if you let your feelings drive your decisions, it creates instability for your team and your clients. Can you give me specific examples of times when my emotions negatively impacted my work? Amanda paused, seeming to consider the question. It's not about specific incidents. It's about your overall demeanor, your communication style, the way you handle stress and conflict. But my client satisfaction scores are the highest in the department. My team's performance reviews consistently rate me as an effective leader. I'm not sure what metrics you're using to evaluate my emotional stability. Rachel, Amanda said, her voice taking on a slightly sharper edge, this defensiveness is exactly the problem. Instead of getting upset about my feedback, you should be thanking me for being honest with you about your development needs. I sat there in stunned silence, trying to process the complete disconnect between reality and Amanda's perception of it. Everything she was calling emotional or defensive was simply me asking reasonable questions about her decision. If a male colleague had asked the same questions in the same tone, would she have characterized it the same way? I already knew the answer. Who's getting the promotion? I asked. We're bringing in someone from outside the company. Fresh perspective, new ideas. Someone with more experience than me. Experience isn't the only factor we consider. What are the other factors? Amanda's smile became strained. Leadership presence, emotional intelligence, the ability to represent the company at the highest levels. Each phrase felt like a coded insult. Leadership presence meant I wasn't authoritative enough. Emotional intelligence meant I was too reactive. The ability to represent the company meant I didn't fit their image of what a leader should look like. I see, I said, standing up from the uncomfortable chair. Is there anything else? I hope you'll take this feedback seriously, Rachel. You have a lot of potential. But you need to work on these areas if you want to advance in your career. Maybe consider some executive coaching. There are some great programs that focus on emotional regulation for women in leadership. I walked out of that office feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. 4 years of exceptional performance, countless late nights and weekend work sessions. Millions of dollars in revenue generated for the company, and I was being told I wasn't ready for leadership because I was too emotional. The worst part was the self-doubt that crept in immediately after the shock wore off. Was she right? Had I been blind to my own shortcomings? Was there something fundamentally wrong with my professional demeanor that everyone could see except me? I spent the rest of that day replaying every interaction I'd had with Amanda over the past 2 years, analyzing my behavior for signs of the emotional instability she described. I came up empty. I'd been professional, prepared, and results-driven in every single meeting, but the damage was done. The seed of doubt had been planted, and it grew quickly in the fertile soil of my ambition and insecurity. That night, I called my mentor from graduate school, Dr. Patricia Williams, who had gone on to become a senior executive at a major consulting firm. I told her what had happened, careful to present Amanda's feedback as objectively as possible. "Rachel," she said after I finished my story, "I've known you for 6 years. I've seen you present to hostile clients, handle impossible deadlines, and manage difficult team dynamics. If someone is calling you emotional, it's not because you're being emotional. It's because they're uncomfortable with your competence." Her words should have been reassuring, but instead they made me angry. If Dr. Williams was right, then Amanda's feedback wasn't about helping me improve, it was about keeping me down. It was about using gendered language to undermine my confidence and justify her decision to overlook me for promotion. Over the next few days, I started paying closer attention to how Amanda interacted with different people in the office. I noticed that when our male colleagues spoke passionately about their work, she called it enthusiasm. When they pushed back on decisions, she praised their critical thinking. When they advocated strongly for their clients, she commended their dedication. But when the women in the office did exactly the same things, the language changed. We were emotional. We were defensive. We needed to learn better self-control. The pattern was so consistent it couldn't be accidental. 2 weeks after my devastating meeting with Amanda, Pinnacle announced that they had hired Trevor Blackstone as the new senior marketing director. Trevor was 29 years old, had 3 years of experience at a smaller agency, and had never managed a team larger than 2 people. His most successful campaign had generated about half the revenue of my average quarterly performance, but Trevor was calm, measured, professional, everything that I, apparently, was not. The announcement came via email on a Friday afternoon, the corporate equivalent of taking out the trash when no one was looking. "Please join me in welcoming Trevor Blackstone to the Pinnacle Creative Solutions family," Amanda's message read. "Trevor brings fresh energy and innovative thinking to our marketing team, and I'm excited to see how his leadership will drive us to new heights." I stared at that email for a long time, feeling something shift inside me. The self-doubt that had plagued me since my meeting with Amanda began to crystallize into something else, something harder and more focused: anger, not the emotional, irrational anger that Amanda would no doubt diagnose if she could see my face. This was cold, calculated fury born from the recognition that I had been systematically undermined and professionally sabotaged. For 4 years, I had played by the rules. I had worked harder than anyone else, delivered better results than anyone else, and maintained the kind of professional demeanor that should have made me the obvious choice for promotion. And I had been passed over for a less qualified man because my female boss had decided I was too emotional. The irony wasn't lost on me. In a company that prided itself on progressive values and equal opportunity, the biggest obstacle to my advancement was another woman who had apparently internalized every sexist stereotype about female leadership. That weekend, I made a decision that would change the trajectory of my career and expose the toxic culture that Pinnacle Creative Solutions had been hiding behind its glossy corporate facade. I was going to document everything, every meeting, every interaction, every piece of feedback. I was going to create an irrefutable record of the discriminatory treatment that I and other women in the company had been experiencing. And when the time was right, I was going to use that documentation to hold Amanda Reeves and Pinnacle Creative Solutions accountable. I didn't know then that within 3 weeks, I would be sitting in a boardroom playing a recording that would end Amanda's career and launch my own into a trajectory I had never imagined possible. But that's getting ahead of myself. First, I had to learn how to be the same woman who had spent 2 years criticizing my emotional communication style was suddenly praising Trevor's passionate advocacy when he interrupted clients mid-sentence. When he raised his voice during a strategy meeting, something that would have earned me a lecture about professional demeanor, Amanda called it strong leadership. But the moment that made my blood run cold happened during Trevor's second week. I was walking past Amanda's office when I heard her laughing, really laughing. Not the polite corporate chuckle she usually deployed, through the glass wall. I could see her leaning back in her chair, completely relaxed, while Trevor gestured animatedly about something. "You're absolutely right," I heard her say as I slowed my pace. "Women in this industry they take everything so personally. They can't separate their emotions from business decisions." Trevor nodded enthusiastically. "Exactly. I get that diversity is important, but you still need people who can handle pressure without falling apart." I stopped walking entirely. "That's why I knew you'd be perfect for this role." Amanda continued, "Finally, someone who understands that leadership isn't about feelings, it's about results." My heart was pounding so hard I was sure they could hear it through the glass. Amanda wasn't just undermining me, she was actively conspiring with my replacement to justify gender discrimination. That's when I realized this wasn't about my performance at all. This was about something much bigger, much more calculated, and much more dangerous than I had initially understood.